And welcome back. And thanks so much for staying with us here on Morning Live. Now, just getting into our final interview, and it, of course, speaks to our question of the day and what Corruption Watch has found. Now, a few parties implicated in massive corruption have been brought to justice in South Africa. That's according to non-profit organization Corruption Watch. The organization says that with elections looming in a few months' time, the need for accountable leaders with integrity could not be more critical. And this comes after Transparency International released the 2023 Corruption Perception Index yesterday. The Perception Index painted a bleak picture of the country's current status. South Africa has now dropped below the global average with a score of 41. And this is one of 23 countries that reached their lowest ever scores this year, stumbling into category of flawed democracies. So to further discuss this and South Africa's performance in that Corruption Perception Index, we join now virtually by Corruption Watch's Executive Director, Karam Singh. Karam, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live, and thanks for availing yourself this morning.
Good morning, Sakina. Thank you so much for having me on the program. Good morning to all the viewers.
Perhaps a good place to start would be to just remind ourselves of the Corruption Index and what exactly it is and how it is assessed.
Thank you. This is an annual index that is produced by Transparency International, which is a global anti-corruption movement. Corruption Watch is the South African chapter of TI. The index measures perceptions of public sector corruption, and it's drawn mostly from expert opinion and the opinion of people from the business sector, from the private sector. So it is a perception survey. The objectivity of it comes from the fact that it's drawn from a variety of different sources. And I think one can track a country's progress by comparing its score in any given year to how it's done in previous years. What we've seen over the years is that countries don't move a lot on this index. So they may go up one or two places or go down one or two places, but it does give an indication of a perception of what the trajectory of the country is. And unfortunately, with a score of 41, as you mentioned in your introduction, South Africa is now matching its lowest score, and it would appear to be on a negative trajectory in terms of the perceptions of how we're dealing with public sector corruption.
Karam, do you find that governments actually care about this perception index, given that they could perhaps rebut by saying, well, this is about the perception of business and experts who may be disgruntled. It does not reflect the broader population and how they may feel about it.
That's fine. I mean, I think government can come forth and say that, but I think as the segment preceding this interview showed, there is a lot of despondency out there within the general public. Of course, it was just a cross section of people providing their tweets and their voice notes. But I think if you were to engage with the common person in the street and say, is South Africa winning the fight against corruption? Are you confident that government is fully committed to the fight against corruption? Do you see progress in this area? The responses you would get from people would largely be negative and would correspond with what we're seeing in the expert opinion. But I think government must come forth and must make its case about what it's doing, and we expect to see some positive messaging from the president when the SONA comes around next week.
So, Karam, if we look at the latest index from last year, South Africa has now gone down 2 points since the last index. And as you say, this is one that matches our lowest score. We're now at 41. But what does this actually mean? You know, what led to this score in general from the responses that were received?
Well, I mean, one can only speculate in terms of what happened in 2023. I think one of the most significant things that did happen was the fact that South Africa was grey listed by the Financial Action Task Force, which is effectively like a ratings downgrade. The reason for that gray listing was an assessment that South Africa has serious vulnerabilities within its financial sector, that South Africa is a destination point for money laundering, that we see significant financial flows going out of the country. And I think there's a broad assessment that in terms of the work of the criminal justice sector, that despite significant cases being enrolled by the MPA in response to state capture, we've seen the MPA struggle with these cases. The first case was struck off the roll by the High Court in Bloemfontein. We know that the Mashele Koko case was also taken off the roll and will now need to be re-enrolled. We've heard serious concerns from the MPA themselves about their own capacity and about their funding to be able to execute their mandate. So, while we have seen some positive developments from the era of state capture, we're still seeing that the country is really struggling from the standpoint of enforcement, from the standpoint of pushing for real accountability. And I think there's a sense that there are some people that are above the law, and that that there's a culture of impunity when it comes to some of the senior leadership who find themselves implicated in corruption allegations.
And then the Corruption Perception Index also says, Karam, that South Africa is now one of 23 countries that reached their lowest ever scores this year. And by so doing, or that would be the 2023 index, but released now, but in doing so, they have stumbled into a category of flawed democracies. Which other countries are in this category? And again, what does this say about where we find ourselves and the efforts that we were told are being put in place to try and turn the tide, so to speak?
So, we're now finding ourselves below the global average, global average of around 43. Some of the countries with similar scores to us include some of the Eastern European countries, places like Kosovo, places like Vietnam, places like Burkina Faso. And again, I think, this notion of a flawed democracy is something which many in our country, many commentators would agree with, that 30 years into democracy, we still have a very sound constitution. We have a rule of law society. We're not descending into a situation of authoritarianism. I think there's a lot of confidence that we will have free and fair elections. The question is, what do those parties who are elected do once they come into power? To what extent are they, driven by the principles of the Constitution and pursuing a good governance and anti-corruption agenda without fear, favor, or prejudice? To even think that we have a zero tolerance approach to corruption, I think is folly. This isn't just a problem of national government. We're seeing this across provincial departments. We're seeing this in the challenges of state-owned enterprises, which was for everyone to see at the Zondo Commission. And we know from the annual reports of the Auditor General that we have serious challenges at local government in terms of maladministration and corruption. So we have a national anti-corruption strategy. We have a firm set of recommendations from the Financial Action Task Force. We have a firm set of recommendations from the Zondo Commission. And I think people would have expected to see more progress, more positive messaging in terms of where we are in terms of the implementation of these findings and recommendations.
So the question then becomes, why aren't we seeing, a greater impetus and, more success rates as far as the criminal justice system as a whole is concerned, given that we've been told that there have been there's been a change of guard in some instances. You've had new entities brought in to try and strengthen the hand of the entities that already existed. So we've spent a lot of money on commissions of inquiry like the Zondo Commission and others. Why aren't we reaping the benefits of all of this? Yeah,
I think we still have serious challenges in terms of the the way the police function in terms of the leadership of the police. I think there's still a significant gap that was created, over a decade ago with the dissolution of the Scorpions, in terms of understanding that we have a dedicated anti-corruption agency whose fundamental task is just to investigate and seek accountability for corruption. We still don't have that kind of elite, dedicated agency. And I think that, we haven't gotten to the bottom of the organized crime challenges that we have in the country, and the fact that we have syndicated criminal groups, and this is now beyond what we saw with the Gupta family, who have their tentacles into state-owned enterprises like Eskom. And it's not clear that we're making significant success in terms of attacking those criminal syndicates and bringing them to book and unwinding their operations. So I think there's serious challenges in law enforcement, and I think there's challenges in terms of the focus of political leadership in terms of saying this is a national priority. We're moving towards a zero tolerance approach, and our analysis is that corruption it inhibits economic growth. It hurts the poor the most, and it creates worsens the situations of inequality in the country. We don't hear that analysis, and I think that's what we want to hear when the State of the Nation comes, and we want to see that backed up in terms of the budget speech, in terms of ensuring that appropriate resources are provided to the agencies that are mandated to fight corruption.
Well, Karam Singh, we don't have to wait too much longer. That State of the Nation address happening next week. But thank you so much for your time this morning. Karam Singh is Corruption Watch Executive Director, speaking about South Africa's performance in the Corruption Perception Index. And it, of course, makes for rather bleak reading.
Yeah, totally. And bleak views and comments and bleak things to talk about.